Do you have any idea how many things can go wrong when you're trying to start your project car for the first time? What's up guys, welcome to the GC journey. In this episode, we start the GC for the first time. So I'll run through some of the wiring jobs we did, like the bulkhead connector, installing sensors, etc. And we'll run through some of the fault finding you might need to do when trying to start your car for the first time. So let's get to it. Starting with the bulkhead connector. We marked where we wanted to locate the connector, cut the hole out to size, fed the cabin side connector through, and placed the locking spring and nut. We then connected the engine bay harness and rotated it to get the bulkhead connector in the desired orientation. Once we were happy with the position, we tightened the locking nut down. We then marked both the bulkhead and engine bay side connectors, so that way every time we go to reconnect them, there's less chance of the pins being misaligned and so less risk of damaging them. So that was the bulkhead connector. Done. Next, it was time to install some sensors that would have been impossible to reach once the intake manifold was assembled. First was this Bosch unit that combines both the map and intake air temperature sensors. And I'll admit this was new to me. I didn't know these existed, but if you're someone who wants to package and keep everything as least visible as possible, then these Bosch units make life much easier. We then had to slightly modify the harness since it was originally planned to accommodate a map sensor and IAT sensor separately. Not the prettiest, but no one is going to see it and it will do the job just fine. Next was the fuel pressure sensor. So threaded in this adapter to give it an angle that will clear the intake manifold, added some liquid Teflon and made sure it was nice and tight. Next job was tidying up the remaining factory harness. My friend Yotam did a very nice job of cutting off all the wires that were not going to be used, masked up all the wires that were, added some sheathing, gave it a nice finish and put it back where it belongs, where no one can see it. So that was another job done. Now, you know it's not going to stay like that, right? I promise it's temporary and I will find a much cleaner solution when I have the time. Since my friend was doing most of the work, I decided to make myself useful by contributing some of my skills. So I took this plug and put it here. See? Useful. We then ran a new positive from the alternator to the starter motor. It's black. It was then time for the intake manifold. So remove tape, put the gaskets back, and put the intake manifold back into place. And now for the moment of truth. Well, at least the first moment of truth for me, running the harness and connecting all the sensors. It was time to see if all the measurements I took were correct, and one of the things I feared most was that there would be parts of the section that wouldn't be long enough. And so, surprise, surprise, the harness wasn't too short. The exact opposite. It was way, way too long. So A, we had to run lots of spare wire under the intake manifold, which, besides the waste of material, it's useless weight, it's less room to run other things under the intake manifold, and it just doesn't look good. B, while I know no one else is going to see it, I know it's there, you know it's there, and I have no other choice but to make a new engine bay harness worthy of the GC. Not now I'll just be happy if it works. Finished installing the last parts required for startup, which were the chase base kit. Again, temporarily mounted just so the car can run, but it too will be relocated once I have new lines made for it. Old cam sensor was replaced with a brand new one. The ATI super damper pulley, torque down to spec, new auxiliary belt, break-in engine oil, power steering fluid, and now it was time for Yotam to do his electrical wizardry. There were a lot of factory wires we had to tap our new harness into, set up the Haltech software, and most of it was beyond my knowledge and understanding, so I was very fortunate to have such a friend to help me. After that, it was time to set the base fuel pressure, and now it was time. You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you? Now, we are going to start this thing before the end of this episode, but I just want you to know that it took a long time. I can't tell you how many tries we did because there were more than I could count or film, but I'll share with you some of the fault finding we did and how we eventually managed to solve it. At first, we thought it was a weak battery, so a new 65 amp stop-start specific gel battery was placed instead. Still no go. Then Yotam decided it would be a good idea to see if the cores were firing, and here his professionalism really comes into play. He hooked them up to an ECU and checked each coil individually to make sure they all work. After confirming they all do, he suggested doing a continuity test for the coil and injector connectors. Once confirming they were indeed all reaching the pins they were supposed to on the ECU side, Yotam then suggested checking the cam and crank sensors. Here we found our first problem. The idiot who made the harness managed to somehow accidentally mix between the crank and cam signal wires. We then tried starting the car again, but it was still looking like the car didn't want to start. Now, I'm leaving out all the obvious things we did, like cleaning and checking the plugs, making sure all the sensors were configured properly in the software, but still, something wasn't working. We even tried switching between the signal and ground wires in the cam and crank sensors to rule out them not being wired properly. Nope. Eventually we tried something we never would have thought of. In the Haltech software, you can choose which car the ECU is supposed to manage, and then all the trigger information will be set in the default configuration from factory. When we saw this value in the TDC offset angle, something told us to try and play with it a little. So we lowered the value, which looked a little high to us, and now, I can't explain why this value prevented the car from starting because I'm not a professional tuner, but all I can say is, who cares? It finally starts, and may I be the first person to say, the GC sounds aggressive. Mwah. Of course, there are a few more things we need to do before going for the first drive, but I'm beyond excited that it starts, and I've waited so long for this moment. So I'll leave you with this clip of the car running for a bit so you can enjoy the sound of happiness. And next episode we will be taking her out for the first drive. So until next time, I thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.